if you can see, we have a bunch of whispers up there. I don't know if Michael noticed.
I've noticed. Just getting mic'd up.
How many here are on Whisper? How many? Okay. Quite a few. How many here work at Whisper? No, I'm kidding. How many here are under 30?
Hello.
Everybody on Whisper. I'm kidding. So I have a few whispers, and that's my favorite whisper. Do you see that? What questions do you ask to someone who runs an anonymous posting site? I thought that was a really good whisper. That was mine. That was my personal one. So all these questions are from the replies I got, and some of them are really good. I'm kidding.
Wow.
I'm only kidding. I just want to...
Tracy, we didn't cover this in the prep.
Yeah, they're really good, juicy questions. No, first of all, I want to thank Michael for making me out here. It's really hard to be the last interview when you had all these people, 400 throughout the day. It's exhausting for them to stay. And Michael, you're here to.
Well, I'm tired too. I was actually yesterday. I was at Medieval Times. It was actually my birthday, and I have like the most amazing team in the world, and they surprised me, and a party bus showed up at the office at 5, and 50 of us got into the party bus, and we all went to Medieval Times.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
So it was.
So 27.
I'm 27. I'm
Okay.
now like much closer to 30 than I am to 20. So
27 years old.
depressing.
Here are a few stats on Whisper. Raised $60 million from the likes of Sequoia, Lightspeed, Tencent. 6 billion page views per month, and last we spoke, you said 30 posts per second, peak time, 1,800 posts per minute. That's quite a lot. So you're 27, so about 7 when the internet was just becoming commercialized. So you're part of this digital generation, and clearly you know this digital generation, and you touched a nerve. So what is it about this audience?
I'm actually on the older side at our
Well, the
office.
older
I
side.
tell people all the time at the office, I make references to AIM, and they have no idea what I'm
true.
talking about.
I know, all of my contacts are on AIM too.
So ASL. What do you mean ASL?
But is that what you call it? Anyway, so what is it about
That means
this audience?
sex, location.
Oh.
It's a question.
What is it about this audience that you're able to tap into?
Well, listen, I think, when you think about the time that we're living in, even it was different from when I was in school. I mean, I remember, and I kind of talk about this all the time, like if I wasn't invited to a party or something, I would hear about it and maybe be upset, but like I'd get over it. Now, imagine you're not invited to a party and you're actually seeing photos of the party on Instagram and Facebook 24 hours a day, like 365 days a year. And so it's like constant FOMO. And I think people's brains are being just wired completely differently, even from when I was growing up. I mean, you're not meant to know what's going on all the time. I mean, it's kind of like what 24-hour cable news did for the news cycle, and it didn't just actually impact the news cycle, it impacted what really happened, right? I think that's happening in our social lives now, where our social lives are moving at such a crazy rate, and we're just always so stressed and so anxious.
So we're more stressed now?
I think so.
The
I don't
millennial
know. I mean, what do you guys
generation's more
think?
stressed?
Show of hands, more stressed or less stressed?
What?
More.
It's a mixed bag. What's one of the most
This is more.
mind-blowing
Wasn't mixed.
posts someone... It's more. It has to be more. His site's not going to work. No, I'm kidding. What's
False.
one of the most mind-blowing posts you've seen?
Wow. So, I think what's really cool about Whisper is that it kind of flips all of these things that you think are the norm or that you think about the world and kind of flips them on their head. And so, we see things that are sometimes seem very, like there's a post that a guy said, I ran into a coworker at the gas station. I was buying cigarettes and she was buying condoms. I'm a doctor, in a hospital. Like, and she's a doctor also, right? Okay. And it was just kind of this like little window into, because we've all had those moments where you're at like a grocery store, you're at a gas station, you like run into somebody and you're buying something or whatever. You're like, I don't want to run into this person. Right? But it's just, there's kind of this whole other world that's going on just beneath the surface that people don't really talk about. And that's the beauty of Whisper. It kind of really shows you what's really going on with the world around you.
That they don't want to necessarily share with everyone or let everyone know it's coming from them.
Well, I don't think it's always that. I think that there's just different venues that you share different things with.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think anonymity has its pros and cons. I definitely believe that it's nice to be able to allow people to have an outlet without fear of retribution. At the same time, I think that it also encourages certain sort of antisocial behavior. And so I think there's definitely a place for Whisper. Clearly, you've raised 60 million, so a lot of people believe that as well, and you have 6 billion page views. But I think that you have, and you tell me, but I believe you have a responsibility to sort of create a healthy online conversation. So what are you trying to do to safeguard against antisocial behavior?
That's a great question. So, I think when we first started Whisper, my co-founder, Brad, and I believed that this had not only the potential to be a safe place, but a place that actually made the world better, right? And we always had this idea that we would only allow you to, anonymity is a tool. Like, think of like any tool like a hammer, all the great things you can do with a hammer. If we didn't have hammers, you couldn't build temples or churches or schools or clinics or anything. But you could also kill someone with a hammer, right? And so and anonymity is the same thing in that it allows people, the like gay Mormon teenager who's really scared to come out of the closet because he's like worried that his parents just won't love him anymore, has a place where he can talk about this. Or the soldier coming home from Afghanistan who it's 4th of July and is like, I have to hide under my bed on 4th of July because the fireworks, bring back my PTSD. Or even a teacher who says like, it's the first day of school and I'm super nervous and I'm the teacher, right? Like empowering all of these really positive use cases that actually make the world feel much more connected and like, hey, you're not the only one and it's totally okay to feel that way. Not everything is this perfect, shiny, bubblegum, persona that we're seeing on all of these ego-based networks. So what we've done is we don't allow you to use anonymity to hurt other people, only to protect yourself, right? So you cannot use any proper names on any posts on Whisper, so you can't go on there.
But public figures, you can't.
Well, we allow conversations about the public domain, so you can talk about, Justin Bieber or Obama or the Lakers or, things like that. But we don't allow you to talk about, we simply just don't allow you to use any proper names. So you can't go on there and say like Michael Heyward is a loser who should, go kill himself or something.
But you're relatively famous amongst the tech digerati here. I was going to type in Michael Heyward to see what would happen. You have a forbidden list. What's on that forbidden list?
Well, again, we're all about really making sure that people not only feel safe, but that we're really setting the positive tone for the community, right? So the number of people who actually display bad behavior on any of these platforms is really, really, really small, right? Like chat roulette started off really, it was really innocent. And no, it did. And then what happened was, right, you kind of had these bad actors that came on there and then set the social norm that, oh, this is a place where people come and take their clothes off, right?
Right.
That's actually not normal. Most people don't do that. Like just, well, that idea doesn't just come to them, right? And so what happens with these communities and you see these with, social networks all the time. I mean, look at, like people are witty and funny on Twitter because everyone else is witty and funny, or people are tend to, there's all these rules baked into Reddit about, like trolling is like a badge of honor. Like that wasn't just, like, it's not everybody just decides to do that. The initial batch of people start to do that, and then they set the norm, right? So the norm on Whisper is that this is an incredibly supportive place. This is a place where every single day people say, I had an interaction on Whisper or a conversation on Whisper that saved my life, right? So these are people that, anyone can go in the app and type in the phrase like Whisper and not alone, or Whisper and save my life, and you will see, thousands of posts of people saying like, I would not exist if it weren't, for this conversation.
No, and you want to have that healthy community, but you have to catch some of these bad actors, right? I mean, you just really have to. I'm not saying that that's the norm.
Again, the two rules are, A, we don't allow you to use anonymity to hurt other people, and B, you should never be on Whisper and feel like you need to take a shower afterwards. I think that's been one of the other issues with anonymity in the past, is that it's kind of had this like dark alleyway kind of feeling to it, that you feel like you're in like some Craigslist, dark place, and that you should feel guilty or ashamed, and hopefully nobody ever feels that way on Whisper.
Have you ever had to take a post down?
We take posts down every day, all day. Yeah.
Okay. What was it?
This is not.
Which one? Like name one.
Well, any post that we believe is violating our terms, right? So this is, we have to very strongly enforce safety on this, within this community, because we don't take this kind of laissez-faire platform approach where we let the community decide and we have flagging and everything. We have 130 full-time moderators, and then actually a large group of people that oversee those moderators. It's a 24-hour-a-day,
I want to talk about sort of the gray line, because you have a lot of responsibility to make those decisions about what you think is acceptable and what's not. Okay. We're going to take questions from the audience. I want to ask about a post that may be libelous. For instance, I saw a recent survey that said 19 Walmart employees reveal stories about workplace mismanagement, and I thought, oh wow, this isn't just about 10 things that your boyfriend says behind your back, or those type of surveys. But you're really getting interesting surveys out there. But how much do you verify in that case? I mean, because you could get in trouble by Walmart, right? I mean, these are people who are revealing stories and naming a company. But how do you verify them?
Yeah.
How do you do that? Or did you verify that before that went up?
So that particular post, I believe, is a post probably by one of our partners. One of the cool things about Whisper is that there's all this great content that doesn't really live elsewhere. And so we have tons of partners like BuzzFeed and Mashable and Huffington Post and so on and so on, that mine all of our content to create really cool pieces of content, one of which is sometimes they do things like 19 things you never knew about people who work at Walmart, or 12 confessions from Starbucks employees, where a guy, some guy will write a Whisper saying something like, I work at Starbucks, and if I think you're attractive, I'll misspell your name, I'll mess your drink up so that you have to come back on purpose, right? So all these different organizations, they have their own vetting processes.
Okay, so they are verified then.
The vetting process of the New York Times is different from the vetting process of Mashable. So everybody kind of has their own processes. But this is one of the things that we're actually really excited about, is all of the storytelling use cases that are coming out of Whisper. Right?
You and I talked about this before, but you're really sort of turning on its head, sort of the therapist industry. You're saying that a lot of these people are saying things that they would normally suppress, and where do they go to typically to share these stories? They would go to a therapist. You have a confession booth, they'll go to confession. So, psychologists have confidentiality.
Anybody can come use the Whisper confession booth.
Yeah, they have a
anytime.
confession booth.
It was actually an intern project that we did, where you can go into the booth and it's painted purple, and you just talk into it, and then it will post your whisper.
And
So
Michael
I invite anybody to come.
And Michael Heyward will absolve you of all your sins. So psychologists have this confidentiality agreement with their patients. And I guess they can compromise that confidentiality agreement if the client is a danger to themselves or a danger to others. So if you say something like, I want to shoot the president or shoot myself, they will have to reveal that to the sources. Do you follow those same guidelines? Do you have to reveal who that is to authorities?
So, we're not in the business of therapy, but we actually do a lot more than a therapist might. I guess that depends on the therapist. But so, we have all different types of policies around dealing with law enforcement. We, I'd say, probably have 2 to 3 interactions with law enforcement per week, right?
Wow. Okay.
I mean, if that's not happening and you're in the business of user-generated content, then you're probably at a very small scale. And so I think that's a healthy number. In some instances, we proactively reach out to law enforcement. Anything that is ever involving a minor, where a minor is at risk, we will proactively reach out to law enforcement as well as to NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So we don't wait for a subpoena. We don't wait for anything. If we think that there's someone who's under 18 who's in serious danger, either from another adult or from another kid, we'll proactively report that.
And do they have to be specific? Do they have to be specific? For instance, what if they don't?
Let me finish almost done. And then anytime somebody is talking about putting their own life at risk, we actually direct that user to the National Suicide Hotline, and as well as we have our own nonprofit organization that we started about 18 months ago that's called Your Voice.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, but how many times a week do you think?
We've referred over 40,000 people to the National Suicide Hotline. So again, in the grand scheme
on a weekly basis?
No, in total. So in the grand scheme of all the whispers ever posted, it's not a huge amount, but this is potentially 40,000 people who were suffering and going through so much pain that they actually felt that they had the urge to take their own life, and that's something that feels really good to know that you're helping those people.
Right. What are your policies around homeland security and terrorism? When does it go beyond a political statement? Well, I'm just thinking forward here. Maybe you haven't had that, but I'm thinking that yours is a great outlet to go beyond a political statement and into a threat. And who determines that? Because to me, that's
honestly,
very
we're
hard.
no different in this area. We're no different than Facebook or Twitter or any other service that is producing user-generated content. This is not a place for people to break the law, and we, obviously comply with any legal requests.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's literally exactly the same as like Facebook or Twitter.
That you comply with certain regulations, and that you would, if something is in a murky area, you would contact authorities and say this is okay. You talked about Your Voice, which I think is
yeah, I mean, listen, I tell people all the time, Whisper, this is actually the safest place on the internet. It is safer than Facebook. It is safer than Twitter. It is safer than Tumblr. Certainly safer than chat roulette. And the reason I think it has a misconception, well, I think it has a misconception a lot like Israel, where people think that Israel is a very unsafe place. Israel is actually like one of the safest places on the planet. There's very few places you would be safer than being in Tel Aviv. And the reason for that is because there's a cop on every corner, right? And Whisper is the same way. So our single biggest expense is around moderation. right? We have 130 full-time employees that only do content moderation, right? So we are looking at everything proactively, tracking everything down if we feel there's any, and we don't just do this, like frankly, the legal component, I mean, that kind of is all very nice and it works well and everything kind of moves on its own on autopilot. But this is about, providing a really safe experience for our users, who are asking our users to make themselves incredibly vulnerable, right? And very often, they're sharing things here that they've never told another human being ever, right? And so we would never, ever in a million years want even a single user, even one time, to be taken advantage of.
Right. And how many attorneys do you have? I mean, you have 130 or so moderators. Do you have a big, huge legal team too? Is that a big expense?
We have enough, yeah. We have enough.
How many employees do you have?
68 full-time, not including the overseas 130 in Manila.
It's quite big. Okay. I want to get to some of those questions, but you mentioned your voice. And this is your nonprofit organization, and to help Whisper's members who have mental illness. So
Well, actually, so it's interesting. No? It started really as a place where our users who were, posting sometimes these things that were just really sad, like young people talking about, feeling like so stressed at college that they feel like they need to take their own life. We said, okay, we need to create a place where we can put all the resources in one place and then kind of direct our users there. And that's what it started as. And then now we've kind of really evolved it into thinking like, how can we actually attack the issue at its core, which is the fact that there's stigma around these issues, right? That it's, if I were to ask everyone in the audience here, like how many, please raise your hand if you've ever had a panic attack. I don't think, okay, we had 3 hands. So but statistically, the number of people who have panic attacks is way higher, right? So the fact that then there's nothing wrong with that, or there's nothing really weird about that, but why is it that nobody here is willing to raise their hand? Because there's like this weird stigma that you're going to be looked at weird, or whatever that social wiring is, that we don't think it's the norm, right? And so the whole idea about Your Voice is saying, how can we kind of take all of this stuff going on Whisper, right? And because we have the data and we see kind of what people are talking about, and and we even look at it by city and by school. I was just talking to someone today. According to data from Whisper, more students at Cornell cheat on their exams than at any other university in the world, right? So what's going on at Cornell that kids feel so stressed that they have to cheat on their tests all the time, right? And so, or military bases that have much higher mentions of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Is it? I mean, that's interesting because there's sort of a confidentiality you have with
This is aggregate data. This is aggregate data.
True, but kids aren't saying I'm from Cornell and I cheat on my test. You're compiling that data and publicizing it. And maybe this isn't a good example, but aren't there some examples out there of taking data that's really personal and publicizing it, and do your users, how do your users feel about that? Because that's personal data that I'm not sure how much they
Well, it's
want
not
it parsed
personal
out.
because so we actually don't collect any personally identifiable information about our users. Right?
How did you know they were from Cornell?
Their location, but that's not personally identifiable. That's like a shared resource. So if we are this location here, it's shared amongst all of us right now, right? There's no login or email address. There's no user database that has every user's email or every user's username, because we don't have usernames, we don't have emails, we don't have phone numbers, we don't ask you for it.
Okay, so you're not compromising their privacy if you come up with some data that's sort of around their location and around what they do, and if you sell that too. So you wouldn't sell that data or sell that content or create content from that?
No, I mean, and that's certainly not the intent. I mean, we just published a piece on BuzzFeed that looks at PTSD mentions at the top 6 military bases in the United States. And what we found was that in a base called at Fort Hood, which is in a city called Killeen in Texas, there's significantly more mentions there of PTSD than anywhere else. It also happens that at Fort Hood, there's been 2 mass shootings there in the past 5 years. The last guy was denied a leave form and just snapped, right? So I feel very comfortable that our, working with this data is a very positive thing.
So, well, this is the data. I'm assuming you're going to monetize through advertising. And so what kind of advertisers, we talked about Your Voice, I think, those are people who are struggling. They may not have mental illness, but these are, what kind of advertisers
I think
are you
honestly,
struggling?
this is kind of a small part of Whisper. The majority of what people are doing on Whisper is things completely different from this. They're sharing funny jokes. They're sharing this random weird text that their ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend sent them. They're taking pictures of their drawings and posting them and saying, "What do you think of my drawing? None of my friends have given me any feedback." Or they're saying things like, "I'm pregnant," and but it just so happens that there is this large pocket of content that really is making people feel less alone and making them feel better, like much, much, much better.
Yeah, no doubt. I was just wondering how large that community was since you created an organization around servicing those, it would be interesting to see what kind of advertisers would be interested in getting in front of those. But let's talk about your deal with VH1, where members submit their secrets to a reality show called Couples Therapy. So how does that work? How do you make money from that or in the future?
Wait, nothing. There's a guy who works at Whisper who did that. But we work with tons of different media companies and properties around evangelizing them to use Whisper. So we do things we've done things with MTV or VH1, or we did things with Paramount or Universal, where they tell people, hey, tell us your thoughts on Whisper. Like MTV has a show called Virgin Territory. It's kind of like True Life, I'm a Virgin. And they promoted the show using Whisper, where it was actually, we've done some experimental ad stuff, and they were one of the people we've run experiments with. And but as part of that, they tell people, after the show, like, oh, tell us, like they'll come up with something. We're like, what song was playing when you lost your virginity, or something like, or sometimes like, when do you know if it's the right time? And they don't say like, join the conversation on Twitter or comment on our Facebook page. They say, tell us what you think on Whisper. Right? And so we have a lot of people with kind of large microphones now deriving a lot of value out of using Whisper.
Yeah, no,
right? So we have like news organizations that do this regularly that say, hey, they'll even post something on Whisper. We had a journalist from a publication that was working on a story about a photographer named Terry Richardson. And she made a post on Whisper saying, has anyone ever worked with Terry Richardson? And within a very, very short period of time, she got responses from someone who had worked with Terry Richardson and had some interesting things to share with her.
We're out of time, but I'm going to go really quickly through those questions, and you're going to answer them in a whisper. Okay. How do you plan to make money?
I just talked about that.
I know we did, about advertising.
Let's go to the next question.
How is free speech evolving in the internet age, or how are you changing free speech?
Listen, I think that, as all of these tools come into play, the social rules still apply. So you can, I'm a huge proponent of free speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded building, right? Or in a crowded movie theater, is the saying. So you can say whatever you want on Whisper, but you also can't go on there and say, they're giving away free tickets to Vator Splash, and when they're not, or something.
All right, I have 2 quick questions. One, because I really want to
You gonna skip
understand
these?
this. Yes, I am.
I hope they're not from any audience members.
Whisper,
You know,
no,
feel
Whisper,
insulted.
we've discussed this already ad nauseum. Whisper helps transparency, I agree. But how does sharing something to strangers maybe hurt sort of authenticity and telling the truth to actual people?
Well, I think
How does
strangers
encouraging
are
that?
actual people. And I think that as technology is connecting us, I think that line of what a stranger is no longer this person that was in your, in the neighborhood in the white van that, your parents told you to stay away from. You have a device in your pocket that connects you to 7 billion other people on the planet, right? And so this is not a taboo thing anymore, meeting new people online. And I think this is just going to, I think in 10 years, you'll pick up your phone and you'll be like, oh, I feel like going across the street for lunch, and you just sit down with some person that you never knew before. And that is not a bad thing or a weird thing necessarily. I don't know, but maybe I'm crazy.
Well, Twitter really changed the face of news gathering, and I think you're doing that to some extent. You're certainly being able to create these surveys in spades. So what does Whisper, I guess 2-part question, how are you changing news gathering, and what is Whisper in 5 years?
Yeah, so one, I'm incredibly proud of everything that we've done in kind of the news and storytelling space, right? I think and when you look at what we've done, whether it's there was like a complete social media outage in Iraq, and we had all of this content coming out of Iraq, and journalists being able to tell what was going on there because you had all of these citizen journalists on the ground using Whisper. We had a whole thing about Uber drivers and background checks and kind of the lax background checks that are going on with Uber drivers. And I think, again, Whisper is very powerful as a storytelling platform. I mean, I talk about this all the time, there's 2 kinds of stories, right? There are the stories that are going to be written no matter what. In 2016, we'll elect a new president, and people are going to write about that. And then there are stories that just won't be told unless you tell them, right? I think Ferguson is actually an example of that. Because actually there was nothing really newsworthy about Ferguson. This is something that happens every single week in America. Unfortunately, a police officer shoots, an unarmed, African American. And because we now, again, kind of all have this ability to broadcast this stuff out into the world, we're able to kind of tell these stories that are not being told, right? So whether that's, you're a soldier on a base and there's some, injustice going on there, or, you work for a ride sharing platform and they don't really do background checks. And the ability to kind of get those stories out, and this is something, again, that we're doing every day now, so it's really exciting.
Lastly, and honestly, this is really, he's so fascinating, and
I'm not.
Great service, new service,
No,
but
no,
really
it's
quickly,
our team
why
that's so
Whisper
awesome
and
and
not,
fascinating.
why Whisper, not Twitter?
Well, I never said that.
No, but you could Whisper versus Twitter, right? You're seeing people Whisper versus Twitter. They could do it on Twitter.
Listen, I'm very long on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, I think Facebook's going to be around for 100 years, at least. I think this is not like, I tell people all the time, anonymity this is not a fad. This is not like something new. This is something that, go to the Sistine Chapel. Like, this idea of a confessional has existed for thousands of years. And it's certainly not new, and it's not going anywhere. I think that very few people derive. I think very few people have derived value from posting from tweeting, right? And I mean, the data will tell you that less than 1% of of Twitter users actually tweet. And you know, whereas like, because you need to have something interesting to say to this kind of one-to-many model, right? Whereas Whisper, you know, you don't need friends or followers to be heard, right? And so it's just a different dynamic. It's a different use case. I wouldn't say it's not either or. If you're Beyonce and you're looking to promote your album, Whisper is not necessarily inherently set up to do that for you.
Plus, you select good images. You're very good at that. Okay.
Again,
Make it
that's
more
our team.
colorful.
I just do the interviews.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.